So you're going to be hearing kind of this first draft of ideas about something that I'm actually hoping that may turn into a book about women muralists. Um, and that's something that I am interested in, and I've had the opportunity actually just in the last year to be asked to interview a few women muralists. Just that's actually what happens when you're a dean. You don't really do much. People just want you to sit on stage and interview people. Which is fun. I love it. It's a great perk of the job. So again, I'm honored to be here and thank you for bringing me back. As you see here, you can't ignore a wall. So when you think of women and public art, does this come to mind? Or this? As W.T.J. Mitchell so eloquently noted in his book on art in the public sphere, Athena to represent impartial justice, the goddess of reason. In revolutionary France, the Statue of Liberty, welcoming the huddled masses, all presided over political systems that rigorously excluded women from every public role. Women as allegory has a long tradition in history of public art, often winged with feet off the ground and hair a-flowing. Larger than life, yet so far from being real or related to real women walking on the street or sitting in the park beside them. For my short time with you this evening, I'm going to talk about real women, full-bodied, grounded, and with a lot to say. When Joanne asked me for this topic that would be relevant to this amazing exhibition showing the work of someone I wholeheartedly admire as a woman artist whose work embodies the convictions she stands for with such beauty and grace. And I should also mention that I had the absolute pleasure of co-teaching a class with Nani. And that class resulted in a mural that you can see on First Street in Albuquerque. And just being able to see and hear how incredible she is as a mentor and as an artist with these young people that we were with for 15 weeks at the University of New Mexico, I learned so much from her. I decided I wanted to delve into this area that I only touch upon when I teach the history of mural painting. So I teach a class that's called Cave Paintings to Graffiti. I've been teaching it for almost 20 years now. And of course, I go through, Michelangelo and Diego Rivera, all of those people, but very few women actually appear in the class. But I have been trying when I collaborate to make a mural to have a female artist, actually a live person, be in the class. But it made me start thinking, like, why don't I have those resources that tell me about muralistas? So for the sake of time, there are many. I'm only showing the work of a few, and I've tried to show a chronological range. There is a deep and rich history, and I'm only at the tip of this iceberg right now. So this new research is pretty exciting, and I hope maybe I'll come back in a couple of years and have like a much fuller picture for you. So let me start actually with Nani. To center us here and with this exhibition, and then we'll jump back in time and do a little bit more of a history in this narrative. I have just a few images. What I love about this exhibition is that they're maps, and that encourages you to actually go and see the work, take little treks. This is something that's near and dear to my heart because the last book I wrote, it was a big deal for the publisher when I said I want to have maps in an art history book and I also want it to be small enough to fit in someone's bag. Unheard of for an art history book, right? Unheard of. So, and I wanted to be portable because I wanted people to take my book and go and with the maps to actually go see them. So I love this aspect of the show. So I'm only showing you a few of her works, and you'll see there's some titles here. I don't actually have all of the titles, complete titles, but some of these images Nani sent to me. This one right here I actually took when I was visiting her while she was making this mural a few years ago, just to talk to her about teaching the class together. So I got to hang out with her so we could have a little meeting about teaching. She sent me a couple of images, a number of women that I reached out to who are painters and do murals. I asked them a few questions in preparation for this talk. And one of the main questions I asked them was, what keeps you painting murals? This image right here is from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it was painted by her and assistant Lynette Hazros. This work, painted during the pandemic, reflected that moment, she said. I wanted to paint what I missed: inclusivity, community, rituals, gathering, interaction, ceremonies, powwows, even just being out, walking somewhere. The idea of walking and powwows turned to women in, for that idea, I turned to women in Tulsa who would send me their moccasins to use in my design. So I hope you can see that it's just the feet walking and dancing. Here's another mural, and she has painted, I don't know how many. Joanne, do you know how many murals? In New Mexico, but she's painted all over the world. Maybe 40? Oh, she's here! Oh my God. You snuck in. Oh, good. I had 40 in here. Great. That was like a little guess. My God, my darling person's here. Thank you. When I asked some of the murals in this presentation what keeps them in the public realm, because of course it's much easier just to paint in the studio, more climate controlled, for one thing. They all mention the importance of interaction, connection, and giving back. And here I have another wonderful quote from Nani, and she says, I've learned that people want to feel connected to their community through art and representation. As citizens who contribute to urban landscapes and to their communities, we often don't see ourselves reflected back in the public art sector. Making public art is a way to create a sense of reciprocity. And I love that last word about reciprocity, because I think that really captures what community engaged art is in public art. You're not just giving, there's always something that's coming back, and very immediate and often unexpected. I must also mention that there is a vibrant tradition. I think I have one more of your images here that you sent me. Two more. There we go. A vibrant tradition here in Santa Fe, and Nani is working in a continuum of socially conscious public artists, such as the collective Artes Guadalupanos de Aztlan, founded in 1971, which I'm sure if you live here, you know about them. Everyone mentioned today sees their public work as opportunities to reach many people at once with a message. As the founder of the Chicago Public Art Group, John Pittman Weber, has written, quote, since murals are public acts, what they say and how they affect existing social situations are highly relevant to any aesthetic evaluation, unquote. They build community or mobilize people to action. And here's another great comment that I found by Jean Charlot, and he wrote in his essay, Public Speaking in Paint, from 1941, a long time ago. But it's a great line. He says, whatever axe the painter grinds, it is his job to grind it fine. I love that. Okay. So what have women brought to mural making at different times in history? Or, I could say, I've chosen a handful of women muralistas to discuss today. This does not represent the many who have assisted, built collectives, painted their own homes. So there was also a whole section of this about Ndebele painting. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? In parts like South Africa, it's like these incredible abstract and colorful paintings of homes where you'll go in entire neighborhoods that are brightly colored, every single home, and that is something that is done almost exclusively by the women. And it's a way that they kind of put their stamp of their individuality related to their family name and on their actual structure where they live. That's in another version of this. Public art empowers its makers and viewers to slow down to view the mural, to dream and stir their imagination, to act and to advocate. The tres grandes of the Mexican mural painting tradition, Rivera, Siqueiros, and Orozco, are well known, and so, of course, is Frida Kahlo, and her own struggles to assert herself as an artist and a woman among that group and at that time. And she also assisted Diego Rivera in a number of murals, just put that out there. However, there were other Mexican painters at that time, such as Aurora Reyes, who was born right before the Mexican Revolution. You see her work here. She exhibited her work and was an art teacher for 40 years. She was a member of a radical artist collective called Liga de Escritores y Artistas Revolucionarios and the Mexican Communist Party, and a number of other unions, including the Teachers Union in Mexico. She also had close friendships with those mentioned above and many others in the creative community in Mexico City. Her activism concentrated on women's rights to counter male chauvinism that she considered to be at its peak at that time. And there's quite a bit written by her. But there's only about 2 articles on her, although there's a lot of archival material. She later became more known for her poetry than her painting. She often declared the Attack on the Teacher, which you see here, to be the first mural by a woman in Mexico. One of her later commissions for the National Union of Educational Workers was a continuation of this theme, the presence of the teacher in the history of Mexico that she did in 1959. These murals are in fresco, a technique revived by the Mexican mural movement due to its ties to the pre-Columbian art forms and therefore indigenous heritage of Mexicans. The school where the first mural was located was founded as the first experimental socialist school, but the original site had been a school for girls at one point and also a prison. So the 6 artists, and all these artists were from that artist collective that I just mentioned, all 6 of them were commissioned to paint 11 frescoes. They all made references to this very strange history, as well as to the violent conflicts that were occurring right before and during the time that they were working. Reyes was the only woman in the commission, because she was the only woman in that collective. Her image addresses the wave of attacks on rural teachers by conservatives to stop educating the poor. These female teachers were often victims, and their deaths reported in the red notes, quote, unquote, of the newspapers, but very few artists represented these truths in their work. Reyes does not shy away, as you can see here, from showing this woman's sacrifice. The young girl in the background is also heroic, as she protects the 2 boys as they witness this horrific act. Reyes wrote in one of her many surviving letters to her unborn child, she actually had 2 sons, quote, "We women have dreamt about dignifying our lives, and now we need to secure a place of justice and respect for the future." So it's assumed that she wrote that thinking that she was having a daughter, but she actually had 2 sons. So you can see here, again, there's so much to support why she felt that being a mural painter and an artist was definitely a way for her to share her convictions. Next one. The influence of the Mexican mural tradition, oops, I'm sorry, I'm out of sequence here. Oopsie, hold on. Oh no, this is where I want to be. The influence of the Mexican mural tradition on the Black mural movement is significant in this story about the evolution of public art in the United States. The Wall of Respect was a collaborative project that involved over 20 artists over many years. The wall was not static, but had numerous phases between 1967 and 1971 when a fire destroyed the building that it was on. The Organization of Black American Culture, OBASI, was in its infancy in 1967. It was a movement led by a few black graduate students at the University of Chicago and a handful of artists, musicians, and writers, some of whom had studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Gerald McWhorter, a graduate student, wrote in the OBASI manifesto, or as it was called, the all-purpose handout, that's what's actually typed on it, quote, "If we are able to create structural unity, if we are able to bring together all of the kinds of creative things that are happening in the Black community and let them interact, the chances are much higher that this creative Blackness, the Black sensibility, this soul, this thing which is ours," these are all kind of in capitalized, "can permeate our lives. We can use it to make ourselves more beautiful because somebody who knows they are beautiful is beautiful. And that's exactly what we have to do," unquote. There were a handful of women involved in OBASI and the Wall of Respect. Sylvia Abernathy designed the layout of the different sections, each painted by a different person, and Barbara Jones Hogu painted the theater section. She and I could. There are not many good photographs of it, unfortunately. But for instance, right here, that big red panel there, that was the one panel done by a woman artist. And here is some imagery that Barbara Jones Hogu was most known for. She was an active printmaker and painter in the AfriCobra Arts Collective that distributed large screen printed posters in Chicago's Black communities so everyone would have Afrocentric identity positive art in their homes to uplift and to edify them. Justine Devan came to Chicago a few years after and was inspired. She is from Philadelphia. She was inspired by this imagery that was all over Chicago, the south side of Chicago, by the time she got there. She knew art could create change. And this is one of her quotes from an interview about why she did this image that still exists. "I refused to do anything that didn't have a social impact. I left a lot of money on the table that way. But we felt we had to make a statement," unquote. This image here, Rise of Black Women, is still vibrant and strong because it's been restored multiple times. And I should just mention a little bit about restorations and just a tiny aside here. So for instance, in a place like Chicago and many large cities have these. Chicago has the Chicago Public Art Group, which has some funding from the city and also private funding, but it's been around since the 60s, and it is responsible for restoring a lot of these older historic murals. And when I was teaching at the School of the Art Institute, as you can imagine, there were some students who then would be connected with that group and kind of became part of the sort of stable of painters who had really good mimicry skills and that they were employed to restore them. So they're all kind of like on a cycle of being restored at different times since the 1970s. She has recounted, this is Justine Devan, many instances of the harassment that she encountered in 1977 when she was up on scaffolding and ladders by herself painting this piece because it was all only about women. Eventually, her perseverance and willingness to talk to her detractors gained their respect so that even the gang, the Rangers in the lower south side of Chicago, quit heckling her and started protecting her. So she was harassed both racially and sexual harassment during the whole time that she was painting this. She gave them images, as she explains, of powerful, self-possessed Black women that they had never seen before. And talking to them, she eventually was able to show them that these are possibilities for Black women. Joining the mural movement in Chicago, New York, Detroit, Boston, Los Angeles, there was established the citywide mural project in 1974 in Los Angeles. It was headed by muralist Judy Baca, who was then the executive director of the Social and Public Art Resource Center in Venice, California, SPARC, that still exists today.
The mural documents the histories of ethnic peoples and was created between 1976 and 1983.
This is really just to show you more of the...
The Great Wall of Los Angeles stands as the largest monument to interracial harmony in America today. The original vision was to create a visual representation of history from prehistoric times through the 20th century. The artistic director of the project was Judy Baca, and her vision, came from her idea and training in community development, but also her work in the Yale School of Muralism in Mexico. And the idea was about collaboration. Essentially, her idea was to engage youth and community in the creation of a public space.
Okay.
So, meaning that an individual artist wasn't hired to create the work. In fact, it took an entire community to create it. Her very first idea was to engage youth in the project, giving them an opportunity to be trained as painters, as researchers. But many of the first opportunities were given to youth that had been in trouble with the law.
So I think it's just so hard to show slides of that. So that's just the kind of constant problem with presenting anything about murals. You really have to be there, obviously, to see what they're like. Okay, so now let's go back to... I just had a little bit more to say about the Great Wall. This isn't that. The Great Wall, we just saw the video of. It was the largest mural, still is, that exists. It's almost a mile, and the Mellon Foundation actually just funded about a year ago to help it become a mile long. So it will be even longer as the longest mural. As you saw, it is in a flood control channel in the San Fernando Valley. And the vignettes, as you heard in the video, represent hidden or lost histories of California, starting with prehistory, often focusing on the role of women in that history. So now I wanted to move on to, we cannot discuss women in public art without talking about the Women's Building in San Francisco. According to Lucy Lepard, the Women's Building was the capital of cultural feminism, where the spiritual and the political met and rowdily merged, unquote. Its founders, Judy Chicago, painter, Sheila Levrant de Bretteville, graphic designer, and Arlene Raven, art historian, came together to create a space for women and for creativity. In the exhibition publication, From Sight to Vision, which was a show on the Women's Building, Sandra Hale writes, quote, and I love this for this talk, "Space is not given, it is a container or a void that is filled up. It is created just as gender is created, as part of culture." That says so much. I'm going to read it again because it really has so many things going on in it. Space is not a given. It is a container or a void that is filled up. It is created just as gender is created, as part of culture. The building's founders focused on education and changing it. Chicago created the feminist art program at Cal State. Women's Space was founded in Culver City. The Feminist Studio Workshop in LA. Woman House was an old mansion, also came out of this, made into a collaborative space for installations. The Women's Design Program at Cal Arts, that's another one, and there are a number of other initiatives and programs that came out of this collective that was created there. Then they founded, when they founded the Feminist Studio Workshop in 1973, later in that year, the Women's Building was located. They built it and they came. The building soon housed galleries, a bookstore, the National Organization for Women, 3 performance groups, and a travel agency. And then over the last few decades, even more organizations have been housed in the house. In 1975, the old building, which you see here, was sold, and many of these organizations moved to a new building in downtown LA. The organization housed in the building now serves over 25,000 women and their families each year. Public art and engagement was also central. In 1983, the project Private Conversations, Public Announcements consisted of 10 artists' prints reflecting their connection to a public site. That's just one example of, again, always the programming at the Women's Building reaching out into the community and projecting, always mindful of projecting images, positive images of women. Oh, and you're seeing here at the top, that is some of the founders. I think it's all 3 of them actually, right there in the front. And then one of the performances of the performance group called the Waitresses that did a number of things there. And here is what you can see today. So this mural was created by 7 artists, and I have a picture of them right here. Well, some of the themes that you see on these 2 facades, there's also painting inside. And the painting started in 1994, but it continued for even into now. They're still painting on it. And these are just some of the details. So everything was focused on women, obviously. So you have everything from gender equity and same-sex relationships, references to both African and Mexican spiritual traditions, commentary about healthcare and women, and then all of these women right here are actually portraits of female political prisoners. Here are the muralists, and what I love is that there actually is a panel that each of these women was asked to paint a flower representing them, and of course you see here the reference to Georgia O'Keeffe. I had to have that here because of where we are. And there's also a portrait of Georgia O'Keeffe on there as well. So I tried to also show the lineage of these really iconic feminist public art acts. And the Women's Building, because it is so prominent and has such a long history, is one that has influenced other mural painters, such as Tamashi Jackson. So she's one of these muralists that I've been in contact with and been able to ask a lot of questions. And that's where this has started here. Oh, here's the page I was talking about. So about the artists, I just wanted to mention, if I go back to here, they're their names. I was going to actually read them to you. Juana Alicia, Miranda Bergman, Edith Boone, Susan Kelk Cervantes, Mira Desai, Yvonne Littleton, and Irene Perez. All of the images of the women are a mix of real, historical, and mythical women from multiple cultures. And at the top, the figure that is presiding, when you see on that side, is Rigoberta Menchú Tum, the indigenous Guatemalan activist, feminist, and Nobel laureate, at the very top of the main entrance. Okay, so now I can go on to Tamashi, that you see here. Tamashi's had an extensive mural career, although she is better known as a studio artist. She grew up in Southern California within its rich Black and Chicano mural movement, which meant she worked on mural projects for most of her life. What kept her making public art alongside her studio practice all of these years was, as she says, quote, the infrastructures of community-centered support, knowledge and relationships, and the intergenerational interactions, unquote. She only had she said most of her murals were documented with like hard copy photographs, but she did send me this one. And what I love about this is that she said that these murals had such an impact on her. And this is what she wrote about it. This is her mural, but the women's building in the Mission District of San Francisco was life-changing when I stumbled upon it as an 18-year-old, literally trying to find my way through the neighborhood. I would go on to work for 2 years as a regular apprentice for one of the muralists in that team, and that was Juana Alicia, who was my hero, unquote. So here, in being trained with actually one of those women's building artists, she then pursued other mural projects, such as this one called Evolution of a Community from 2004, and it was inspired by her interactions with first-time juvenile offenders in a San Francisco-based arts immersion program, because none of the students there expected to live past the age of 18. That made her make Evolution of a Community because she had this desire to visualize the potential of long life from infancy to being an elder. This imagery served, and still does, as a daily, unavoidable dose of hope for these youth. Okay. So I'd like to end. That's right. This is a great image of her drawing because then you can see all of it together with kind of the older couple in the center, and then the progress of the different ages. Which I also like how there's almost this reference to art history of going back in so many different areas, from antiquity to the Hudson River School painters, of showing the ages of man, and how the basis for that in this case was really to uplift these at-risk youth. All right. We already saw that stuff. I want to end by at least showing a few images of other feminist public art collectives that are mentioned in the description. And I've reached out to them, and I've been having a great dialogue with them that I hope becomes something bigger. But here we're going to go again to these links. And I have to do that. So this Women on Walls, or WOW, is this amazing collective that was started in 2013. A small group of street artists encouraged by the political movement in Egypt launched WOW. Now 60 artists strong and located in other parts of the Middle East, they use graffiti to talk about women and women's issues and their rights, with an aim to contribute to the empowerment of Arab women. The convenings that they pull together create large-scale public work, often include access to resources regarding many issues plaguing women in the region, from discrimination to domestic violence. In 2014, WOW organized the first regional street art festival in Amman, using the theme From Fear to Freedom. During the week-long festival, 25 graffiti painters from 7 different countries painted the longest wall in the Middle East in support of women and women's rights. So I'm just hoping that you'll write this down and go under WOW, and then you can explore all of this yourself and see some of the really amazing imagery. All right. With this young artist, who I had a delightful and poignant interview with in the fall, they go by Lauren Y. They received a BFA from Stanford and fell into street art and mural painting while working in a pirate store. That's right, a pirate store in Los Angeles. A store that sells pirate wear. They love to talk about how they were literally like sewing decorative eye patches. And they had the opportunity to assist a local muralist who can't come in to buy some pirate wear in Los Angeles, and that turned into an apprenticeship throughout the United States and internationally. And now they're making their own works around the world. For Lauren, being able to represent Asian and Asian American people and stories in so many contexts is an opportunity that they enjoy. Being able to put something in a neighborhood that then makes more people feel valued in a society where they are often devalued because of their race or their gender is very important to them. They see their murals, as, quote, portals to alleviate the heaviness of reality, unquote. And again, the mission that this young person has for their public art is so compelling that when I was talking to them about, well, don't you want to go back into the studio? And they do, but every time they want to shut down the mural making, they have to go back because there's another compelling location, another compelling need, like this amazing Stop Asian Hate image that they created in response to what we've been experiencing in the last few years. So their public practice is constantly pulling them and pulling them into places all over the world. I know some of you have heard me say, maybe, that I have a very difficult relationship with art history. My discipline, I've been spending half of my life on it, I feel. And that difficulty has to do with how insular it is. Also, that's my problem with higher education in general as well, but I'm still in that too, right? And so one of the things I remember really enjoying art history, but always thinking about the need for me to try and do a type of art history that reaches more people, that's more accessible, and really that's something that my parents would read. That's what's been like motivating me ever since I went to grad school. I love it. I love talking about objects, as you can see, but art history, I mean, how many people know what that is in the world? And so that pursuit was then really heightened when I took my second job teaching was at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And and that was in the 90s, where going into studio crits and seeing everyone being taught to be really insular and looking inward. And I felt I was saved by having interactions with mural painters. I just kind of fell into, it was before I was even teaching that course, but I did work on murals in my dissertation, and I don't even remember how I met John Pittman Weber. Maybe he was at SAC for a lecture, and I started talking to him, and then I started going to the Chicago Public Art Group, like they had potlucks on Tuesdays, and it was such a relief in many ways, as you know, Nani, because you're one of them, just to be around artists who were not so much about themselves, but really saw their craft in service of lots of other people. And the way that they were so great at negotiating their egos and their art making by always talking to so many people the way you do, and then being able to kind of put that all in a blender and then come up with an actually coherent public piece that then also has a life beyond anything they could have imagined. Just all of that generosity of art making really jived with me in terms of what I started off saying, that I had this kind of uneasy way in which I was in a field that I didn't fully believe in. So I just love hanging out with y'all. You know, I love you, Nani. Just fun, just better conversations that I felt I could relate to a lot more. And so then to kind of bring my own scholarship in line with this interest is what I've been doing, trying to do. And then teaching, and also teaching artists in public making, and then falling again by serendipity into my straight up art history lecture course on the history of mural painting, actually getting a component where we made a mural. So then I started doing this, and that was just because at my kids' elementary school, they found out that I taught this class, and the principal said, "Oh, can you get some of your art students to make a mural here?" So then the class became transformed into this history through practice, is what I call it, where we have this parallel project, and that's what Nani was part of when we did the project here, where they're making a mural, but they're also getting lectures like this about the history of mural painting. So one day learning about the Sistine Chapel, and then later in the semester actually learning from someone like Nani, like how to paint a wall, how to do projection, all those things to make a mural. Yeah, I mean it's still a very male dominated field, for all of those reasons, you know, that the physical labor of it. Um, and that's unfortunate because, as you see from this, again, tip of the iceberg is that women artists have so much to say and can have such an impact. And I'm sorry that my going on the website wasn't that great, but really go and look up WOW, because the images that they make that are covering entire neighborhoods with these kind of almost in the tradition of happenings, these convenings that they do, um, are really helping women escape certain oppressions that they're experiencing in the Middle East. And it's really guerrilla. It's like guerrilla warfare that they're doing with these incredibly beautiful images. So they can make such an impact.